Many of you know my next guest. His name is Karthik Venkataraman. He's been a television reporter on a couple of stations, both sports and news, in this market. He's now making documentaries about some greats of ETSU basketball, namely Calvin Talford. You can watch this video on YouTube. It's a little over 14 minutes long, talking about the ETSU's greats career, the slam dunk contest that he was in 1992 that I believe he won, and you can tell me about. He's Castlewood, Virginia's own, but he's also Johnson City's own and also Martinsville, Virginia's own, Calvin Talford. Karthik belongs to the Tri-Cities, for better or worse here. Karthik, it's great to have you with us. Tell me, you are not of an age group that I think would vividly remember the quote-unquote glory days of ETSU basketball, the 4 straight NCAA tournament appearances that Calvin Talford was part of. What was the motivation for making a documentary on Calvin Talford?
Yeah, so it's funny. I was actually telling somebody yesterday, Calvin left college the same year I was born, so I actually didn't even live the glory years of ETSU basketball there. But, I love ETSU basketball. I love ETSU being an alum from there. So just getting to know the history and, once you get on YouTube, you go down the rabbit holes of getting to watch some of the greats that played at ETSU. And then you eventually come to Calvin Talford. He's just one of those guys that really captures your attention, obviously, because of the dunk and just because of all the success he had in Castlewood, the state of Virginia, and at ETSU. So I was just immediately fascinated by his story, and I just wanted to get to know him better. So I said, hey, let's do a documentary on him. I want an interesting topic, and he's quite the interesting fellow, I can tell you that much.
It's kind of funny because when I think about it, Talford might be the third most known player on that team. Greg Dennis was the leading scorer. Mr. Jennings was the one who went on to play at Golden State for Don Nelson. And he also left ETSU second all-time in assists in the NCAA. But everybody, it was basically Mr. Jennings. That was the star of the team. And then, you had 4 other 1,000-point scorers. Again, why do you think that Calvin Talford stands out to you 25 years later?
I just think I think the sense of community first, even because he was such a great star at ETSU, but then when you look at his time when he's at Castlewood, he's somebody that's still adored there today, and he's somebody that, when anytime he played basketball, track and field, baseball, football, the stadiums were filled because they wanted to see Calvin play. I think it's that sense of community still in Castlewood today, and just the kind of figure that he is to such a small community where sports is one of the major things there. In Castlewood, not to be like a diss or disrespect to Castlewood, but there's not a whole lot to do there. And I'm sure Calvin would tell you the same. So just for that to be such a pride in that community and for them to take such pride in their athletes, I think that was a really cool story about just Calvin Talford. And then also from being from relatively in this area from Southwest Virginia, I thought that was a really cool story as well.
When did you meet him?
So it's a funny story. I actually did not know him. I was at the ETSU women's basketball game when ETSU was playing Chattanooga here at home. And at that mind, I knew I wanted to do a documentary on Calvin, but I didn't quite know how to get in contact with him. I texted a couple people that I thought that might know him, but they didn't have his number. And then I got a tip that sometimes he shows around to the ETSU basketball games. I might be able to catch him there. So I wasn't expecting meeting him that night, and I just went to the ETSU women's game. I was just going to see how they'd fare against Chattanooga, and Calvin was sitting 3 rows in front of me, and I was like, that's Calvin Talford. That's the guy I want to do the documentary on. So after the game was over, I got out of the stands. He was on the floor. He was talking to President Dr. Noland at ETSU, and they were just on the floor talking about Calvin's days when he was at ETSU. And so I just stood there, waited for 15 minutes, and after their conversation was done, I just walked up to Calvin. I said, hey, you're Calvin Talford, right? And he said, yeah, I'm Calvin. I was like, hey, I'm really interested in doing a documentary on you. Would you like to do that? And he said, yeah, sure. And I was like, okay, well, let's grab lunch sometime, and we'll start talking about doing it. But, as far as meeting him, I just walked up to him as a stranger, and I just said, hey, my name's Karthik. Can I do a documentary on you?
And how long ago was this?
Oh, man. When did ETSU play Chattanooga at home? It had to be late February, March, somewhere in that range.
All right, so just this past year.
Yeah. I haven't known him for long. This documentary Probably took me a couple months to make altogether, so I put it together pretty quickly.
That's impressive. I thought that this would have been about a year or so in the making or so. And, it's 14 minutes long, which is kind of interesting in itself because, you're talking a little bit about the modern day broadcast, which doesn't necessarily have to be 20 minutes, or I should say a half hour or an hour, or when I say 20, like 22 minutes in fitting in for commercials. You've done this in less than 15, and admittedly, Talford did not play in the NBA. You do mention, although you don't elaborate in the documentary, about his professional career in exotic places like Asia and overseas and such. But nevertheless, I'm guessing that was kind of by design to make this, let's say, podcast length rather than film length. Am I correct?
Yeah, so the 15 minutes, I actually, to be honest with you, did this for a class when I was at ETSU, and the teacher actually originally gave me a 10-minute span to do, and I got permission to do it about 15 minutes. But I thought about making it longer. There was just so many great stories about Calvin that I learned while doing this documentary. But as I kept doing it, the 15 minutes, just for some reason it felt right. And I know a lot of people's attention spans, they don't like to sit down and watch stuff that are longer than usually even 5 minutes. So the fact that, I've been amazed. I didn't even think 50 people were going to watch this. And within the first 24 hours, I think it had 1,000 views on YouTube, and it's at 1,500 or something like that right now. And a lot of people, it's getting a lot of traction. And at 15 minutes, I'm just really appreciative that people are actually taking time to sit down and watch it. But I think a lot of people are just grasping on to the really cool story that Calvin's all about.
Karthik Venkataraman, he is, just made a documentary. Many of you have watched it, as you just said. It's trending rather well locally on YouTube. A couple of things that I saw in the story of Talford. One was that the mini dome attracted him to come to ETSU. At the time, it was one of the 50 largest arenas in college basketball. It was, it was big. And I'll tell you, it was that attraction where I always used to look at it and say, boy, this is a big arena. And isn't it great to have a big arena at ETSU? Do you think that ETSU in modern day is losing something by not having the big arena to play in?
I honestly used to work some of the basketball games when they were still playing in the mini dome, and I absolutely love the atmosphere. However, them playing in Freedom Hall, the kind of gym that like Brooks Gym is now, Freedom Hall is a little bigger than Brooks Gym, but just like that atmosphere when you can pack in a lot of fans and it's really tight and it just seems the tension's really there. I don't know. I don't really favor the small arena over the mini dome, but I'm not really, I don't really even lean one way. I really enjoyed my time. I guess I have sort of an attraction to the mini dome because I spent so much time in it watching basketball games. Even when I was a kid, I used to come with my dad a little bit, and then even when I was in college working some of the games. So I don't know. I don't really lean. I don't think it's losing some of the magic or anything like that. I think a lot of people enjoy the Freedom Hall venue. I don't know. I don't really lean either way, but if I had to pick, I honestly still wish they were playing in the mini dome. If that answers your question.
No, it's on campus, and there are things to do around it, and ETSU is not being subservient to a high school when they played at the mini dome. They're talking to Karthik Venkataraman. You know him from, WKPT when they had a sportscast, as well as WCYB News. Karthik, what is your favorite story in this documentary?
Oh, man. That's a tough one. I really like the 59-point game against Chilhowie. That's something I think that's just amazing. And Calvin was an extraordinary athlete. I believe his senior year he averaged something like 30 points, and then he also had like 15 rebounds a game. That was just incredible to me, that whole entire senior season. But to score 59 points in a game for anyone, that's just incredible. And to break the school record while doing it. And that night he was just on fire. And the fact that, you hear it in the documentary, his coach just talks about seeing Calvin before the game and just seeing it in his eyes that he was going to do well. I just feel like that buildup of the story, for him to do so well in that game against what was a huge rival in that area. They consider that the biggest rivalry in Castlewood. I just thought that was really cool. That was probably my favorite story that came out of it. But to also set three state records in track and field in the same day is also really cool in itself. I'm sure you would pick that he played for the Martinsville Phillies if I had to guess, right?
Well, yes, it would be due to the fact that he played with Chris Lowe, and Chris Lowe was my baseball teammate at University High School, and Lou Thornberry, who was the head coach at the time, had the good sense to make me Chris Lowe's backup, which meant that I never got to play. And that was a good move by Lou Thornberry, because that was my abilities, to be brutally honest with you. I had 4 varsity at-bats, popped out in 1, struck out on the 3, and I can tell you all about them because that's how much it meant to me. But I know, really, if I could have any one wish, it would be that I was a better baseball player than I was. But anyhow, that was playing with Chris Lowe. And that is a local player, a Johnson City player, and at University High, the only University High baseball player to ever play professionally. I always thought that was a great tie-in with the Martinsville Phillies, especially with such a great ETSU athlete such as Calvin Talford. I really wish that you had been able to find my old friend Chris and just ask him about that year in minor league baseball. But baseball, basketball, Calvin was very good. He said in track and field events, he was setting records left and right. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, he was just actually when he went to ETSU for his first couple years, he had told me that he had also joined the track and field team. He went up to a couple of the events that ETSU held as well. I mean, he's just one of those guys, if you ask him, and it's one of the first things you hear in the documentary, like all he ever did when he was a kid was he played sports and he'd hang out with his friends. So just playing sports all the time got him into about everything, and then to just be really good at track and field too, and then he did so well when he was in high school. He got elected into the Virginia High School Hall of Fame for track and field as well as basketball and football as well. Then ETSU had some interest in him at track and field as well as basketball, so he did a little bit of that. But then as time went on, he decided that it was kind of becoming too hectic with his basketball schedule, so he kind of laid off of track and field at that time too. But I mean, I think it really just attests to the kind of athlete that Calvin was, because he was just able to do so many things so well. But yeah, track and field, he was definitely an outstanding athlete. I believe he had a 7-foot in the high jump. He was telling me that 2 state records still hold today. I'm not quite sure. I haven't fact checked it, but I mean, he was an impressive athletic. Had an impressive athletic ability when he was in high school and in college.
Did he have any thoughts, or did you ask him why ETSU basketball went into a rather rapid demise after those glory teams in the early 90s, late 80s?
You know, I really didn't ask him that because my story just solely focused on him and his career, so I didn't really focus on the stuff afterwards. But I mean, I'm pretty good friends with him still. Maybe that's a question I can ask him and get back to you on.
And I mean, admittedly, he was not, he was playing basketball overseas and such, but I would kind of be curious about that. I do remember that era, Karthik, and rival sports talk show hosts at the time basically saying of ETSU, enjoy it while it lasts, instead of, well, could a program be built here? And I did think that was a damning testament to the Tri-Cities media that maybe influenced the culture that the glory days of ETSU basketball were going to be here today but gone tomorrow, instead of something to build on like what has happened, let's say, at Gonzaga or even Butler, which is now in the Big East Conference and certainly wasn't that high ranking prior to their back-to-back NCAA tournament final appearances. We're talking to Karthik Venkataraman. Are you going to do another documentary?
Yeah, so I'm kind of just enjoying the fruits of my labor here on this one. Just releasing it a couple days ago. I believe I released it on May 2nd. Maybe so. I'm getting ready to head out to Syracuse, digital athlete. So I'm not quite sure. Documentary. It's not something that a journalist and a play-by-play guy. So this was kind of stepping out of my comfort zone. But I really enjoyed the process. I really enjoyed the story. I think the one really cool thing about documentary is getting to build relationships with people, because you get to meet them more than once. Like when I was doing journalism, you see somebody for 20 minutes, and then you might see them again eventually for a different story. But I feel with this, it's a more personal connection to the people that you've met. And I can't thank Calvin Talford and Mo Hayes and Randy Poole enough for meeting up with me and telling Calvin's story. It was just an absolutely incredible experience.
Well, he's Karthik Venkataraman. I'm impressed that you're going to I think it's the Newhouse School up there at Syracuse. Am I correct there?
Yes, sir. You got it.
Yeah, I believe it was, and all this for the master's program. And I'll also wish you a lot of success, Karthik. I mean, that shows you're going places, because when you graduate from Syracuse, I mean, that's a golden ticket for sportscasting success. I mean, you look at, there are a lot of great sportscasters. I've even known some pretty poor ones who have gotten some pretty good jobs just because they had that piece of sheepskin from Syracuse. So I wish you a lot of success going up there. And really, but before you leave, doing a documentary on Calvin Talford is quite a testament. Before I let you go, though, one last question. You are, I think, 25 years old now.
Yeah, I turned 25.
Okay. So I am curious. I mean, we have these discussions as we try to figure out what our target audience is going to be, Karthik, and we try to, say, how do we get our audience younger? Everybody wants to get their audience younger, as you know. Historical element. You're doing something of a historical element, 25 years gone by. What is, I guess I should ask you here, it always has bothered me when someone will say, well, why are you doing that? That was 20 years. You didn't live through that era. Because, my goodness, I've always liked to read books about history. I've always been intrigued by, teams of the past, that sort of thing. What do you think the relationship with a younger generation is with sports history?
I don't know. I think it just depends on what kind of sports fan you are, because as you attest that you really enjoy sports history, I really enjoy sports history, and we both are huge sports fans. I mean, you have your own radio show. My career aspirations are to have something of that sort eventually. But I think a lot of it has to do with, a lot of people are also interested in what's new next now. They kind of just want to know what's happening right now and what the future is. They don't pay a lot of attention to the past. It's just kind of something that they have to do to go out of their way, I guess, if they're a casual sports fan. Whereas if you're somebody that really loves sports, it really has to do with interest level, I guess. That's what I would have to go with.
I would buy that. And I think a lot of times you look at history as being part of the totality of the whole. The Patriots win their 5th Super Bowl. Okay, the totality of the whole is this the greatest team of all time? How does it rank with the Lombardi Packers or the Knowles Steelers or the Walsh Niners or some? That's the next question to ask. And you really do have to start digging into, okay, Paul Brown, how good were these guys? Wait, you can't, the linemen are that much lighter, but were they smarter? Things of this nature. And anyway, that's what I've always found very interesting, and I think that a lot of people are finding the Calvin Talford documentary interesting as well. I learned something, held to 3 points against Michigan, and that being a big factor as to why the Bucs did not have the second upset of that NCAA tournament back in '92. Of course, they were playing a Fab Five. Anyway, Karthik Venkataraman, check out the Calvin Talford documentary. It's on YouTube. Takes you less than 15 minutes to watch and nothing out of your pocket. Go check it out. Karthik, thanks for being with us.